Welcome to Fans First, a sports podcast where your voice matters most. Hosted by Hall of Fame sportscaster Jim Powell. This is the show that puts fans at the heart of the conversation. Whether you're cheering in the stands, screaming at the TV, or debating with friends about the latest trades, Fans First is here to amplify your thoughts, your insights, and your love for the game.
It is great to have you with us for our very first episode of our very first podcast. I'm Jim Powell, and we're joined by a gentleman who needs no introduction, but will get one whether he likes it or not. He is a longtime Atlanta Journal-Constitution college football writer. I've been following him for many, many years. He's the author of 12 different books. Southern Fried Football, a revised edition, is out, forward by Keith Jackson, that a lot of people know, very popular book. And then the more recent book that Tony Barnhart has put out is The 19 of Green. It's football, friendship, and change in the fall of 1970. His experience with integration in small-town Georgia as a member of Greene County's first integrated football team, published in November of 2023. And that's a great book that a lot of folks are going to want to read. We'll ask you more about that, Tony, in a couple of minutes. I want to ask you, how does one become bestowed with a nickname like Mr. College Football? That is a tremendous honor. I know you've got a lot of honors, but that's got to be one that when people call you, hey, there's Mr. College Football, that's got to make you happy.
Well, it does. And first of all, Jim, thanks for having me on your initial podcast. I appreciate it. I've certainly followed your career closely, and I'm honored that you would have me on. Now, as far as Mr. College Football is concerned, I tell this story all the time because it's true. I can take absolutely no credit for that at all. When I was with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, one of the editors came to me. They were just putting up their online presence. They were building the website and all that. And the editor came to me and said, "Tony, we want you to start a blog." I said, "That's fantastic."
What's a blog?
What's a blog? And they explained to me what a blog was. And I said, they explained to me what a blog was. And once I got that, they says, okay, we're just going to let you know, we're going to give it a title and we're going to call it Mr. College Football. And I said, isn't that kind of cheesy? They said, yeah, but cheesy works on the internet. So I can't take any credit. It stuck. And when I left the AJC back in 2009, I asked my daughter, who's an attorney, can I take the title with me? She said, Dad, has anybody else ever been Mr. College Football? I said, no. He said, then you're it. So, and it's stuck, and I am honored.
Well, and you've worked a lot of places besides just the AJC, obviously. You worked with CBS for quite a time, had quite the schedule doing a regular college football show there. And then the SEC network seems like a perfect fit for Tony Barnhart. I'm sure you felt the same way. For a guy who's a newspaper guy, a sports journalist from way back, what do you think about, being the guy in front of the lights and the cameras?
Early in our career, all of us old newspaper guys who grew up in the business together, our attitude about television and the electronic media was, that's something that those folks over there do. We're the serious journalists. We're putting out the newspaper every day. But then as time moves on, it became very, very clear. If you're going to have any future in the business at all, you've got to have more than one tool in your toolbox. And I tell this to journalism classes all the time. You got to have a lot of different things going for you. You got to know how to do video, how to download, how to upload, how to edit. And I said, guys, we all had one little silo that we lived in, and that was the newspaper business, and that changed. So I've come to love television and radio and podcasting and all the things that come with it.
Well, you do a great job. No question about it. That's why we're so excited that you're here, because the college football season is just about to get underway. And I know all the people that are watching this podcast today, everybody is thrilled that football is going to be in the air and a little cooler weather and all of that. I still get really excited when football season rolls around. Obviously, I love other sports also. But what about you? Do you still, even after having been in college football and around college football for so long, do you still get really excited when you get to this point in August and know that September is almost here?
I do. And when I don't get excited, I'll know it's time to go do something else.
Right.
But no, every year when particularly here in the South, life has a certain rhythm to it once football season starts. There's football season and not football season, and I know we're getting close to football season. I got stopped in Publix the other day, and a guy says, "Well, Tony, I've just got one question." And of course, one question led to two, led to three, and all that. Next thing I know, there's Mrs. College Football down the aisle say, "Hey, we got to shop, Mr. College Football. You still got to have groceries." And so I know when people stop you in the grocery store, football season's getting close.
Mrs. College Football, I forgot to give her the credit for that she deserves. So I am duly corrected.
She deserves a lot of credit. We just celebrated our 47th wedding anniversary.
Nice.
Last week, and how she's put up with me this long in this business is a tribute to her. So,
well, congratulations to you both. That's unfortunately a rarity in this world. Let's talk about current college football. Let's talk about the name of this show is Fans First. We named it that way because, fans, they pay the money, they buy the tickets, they buy the apparel, they watch on TV that generates more revenue and radio, et cetera, and they get very little say in the game. Mm-hmm. They weren't surveyed when NIL became part of the college athletics scene. They weren't surveyed when the portal became just wide open with people running in and out all the time, their favorite players coming, their favorite players going. Fans, I don't think, are real happy with these changes. What are your thoughts on NIL and the portal? To me, the NIL is one thing because they probably had no choice in some ways because of the courts, et cetera. But when you take NIL and roughly at the same time, the portal gets wide open, right, that's, I think, created some chaos that is very disappointing to the fans.
Well, it is, Jim, but I'll share with you something that Nick Saban said in a conversation, and it said, look, we're never going back to the way it used to be, but what we're doing now is not sustainable. He said, there's a sweet spot in there, and we're going to find it. He said, because we've always have. The thing about college football is that we adults try to screw it up, try to mess it up, and we can't do it. The sport is too resilient. It's got too much going for it. So college football is going to be fine, but we're going through a transition period. There's no question. Starting next year, the players are literally going to be paid, all right, out of a $22 million pool that each school will have to compensate its athletes. And so all this change is coming, but the irony of it all is that the game that we watch on the field every Saturday is better than it's ever been. It's a great game, and it always delivers. So I would just say to the fans, remember why you love college football, but we're just to be honest, we're not going back to the way it used to be when the athletes were very limited in what they could receive. The courts have made it very clear that the athletes will be compensated and they will have the freedom of movement that we're talking about.
Is the portal going to remain wide open for all time, or are they going to find some ways to at least a little bit restrict the movement?
Well, they would tell you that they restrict it now because the portal is only open 2 periods every year, once in the spring and once in December. And those open periods last about 15 days. So if you're not in the portal during one of those open periods, you can't just automatically transfer. That's a big part of it. But I will simply say, Jim, is that the freedom of the players. Well, okay, it was a court case that I was familiar with that I found out about. They walk in there and the judge says to the NCAA, or they're trying to restrict the movement of the players, and the judge says, well, wait a minute. You're trying to restrict the movements of the players. Do you have any such rules like this that restrict the movement of the coaches? Well, no, Your Honor, there are no rules like that. And he says, then why are we here? And that's the position the courts have taken. You can't put in a separate rule for the adults and a different set of rules for the players, which we've had forever. And so there will be the portal will be open twice a year, but it's not going away.
Let me ask you this. Is this sustainable for the coaches? I mean, it's bad enough they have to start recruiting these kids when they're in 8th and 9th grade and follow them all the way through, and they get a verbal commitment, and then they change their commitment, and then back and forth, and you finally get them to sign on the dotted line. But then once they're in your program, with the portal being what it is, there's also an avenue for them to go right back out. So you are constantly re-recruiting
Right.
the same kids you've been with since they were in 8th grade. Is that sustainable for coaches?
I don't think so. And the coaches will tell you that's of all the headaches that come with all of this stuff, having to constantly recruit your roster over and over and over again is the one that does it. That's why at the end, I don't know how long it's going to take, Jim, but somewhere down the road, I think the players are going to be under contracts. Because if you think about it, what other way to hold players in one spot other than having a contract? And I think that's where we will eventually end up is the players will actually be employees of the university and they will operate under a contract. You'll have collective bargaining like you do in the NFL. I talked to one big time college coach. He says, look, we're headed to the NFL model. Everybody knows that. So we might as well start getting our heads wrapped around the fact that the only way you're going to be able to sustain it and cap salaries, negotiate with a players union thing, unless the players become employees, there's no other way to do it. The players are telling us all, you want me to stay put? Great. Give me a 3-year contract, pay me this amount of money, and you got me for 3 years. But if I've got opportunities to improve my situation and my family situation, you're not going to put up a law that says I can't do that.
Well, those are great points across the board. Appreciate you sharing that insight. Let's talk about the more fun parts of college football. Let's get out of the business a little bit here. Clemson and Georgia. I mean, that is a compelling first college football game that's right around the corner. I'm really excited about that. There are other good games that first day as well. But what do you think about the Georgia Clemson game as sort of the kickoff to all of college football for this season?
Yeah, of all the great rivalries, this is one that gets overlooked. I mean, the two schools are 90 miles apart, and they've had incredible competition between the two. I could be wrong on this. I think Georgia's going to be pretty comfortable in this game. Obviously, they have a big edge at quarterback in Carson Beck and the overall depth of the roster. I think Clemson is going to finish second to Florida State in the ACC this year. So I think Clemson will play it tough, but I think Georgia pulls away in this game.
I don't know how much you've looked at the new SEC tiebreaker rules that they're talking about. Obviously, it's gotten complicated for which teams get what when you have this many teams and you don't really have divisions. And do you like what the SEC has done in terms of the way they're going to go through the different protocols to determine which team will get the edge over the other, even if they played a tie game or never played at all?
Right. I think I know they have put a lot of work into the tie-breaking system that goes on and on and on, which you have to do. But it's really the only way you can break the ties without divisional play. They've had divisional play in the SEC since 1992 when they went to divisions, and this is the best way to do it. And it's all written down, and everybody understands what it is. So I'm good with the tiebreakers. I think they've done a good job there.
Should the SEC have gone to a larger number of conference games to try and avoid all these tiebreakers and the controversy that comes with it?
That is an argument, Jim, that they're going to have next year. They decided because they'd had so much success with an 8-game conference schedule, which they will do this year and again next year. The SEC's won 8 of the last 13 national championships, so it's kind of working. But there's certain realities that you've got to face, and one of those is without a 9-game conference schedule, you're going to lose some good rivalries. For example, Auburn-Georgia is one of my favorite games. It always has been. But the way it's set up now, you won't play Auburn-Georgia every year. You'll play every other year. And that's what you lose by sticking with an 8-game conference schedule with this scheduling model. So we're going to have that argument next year. More SEC games is something the fans remember. When we had the pandemic and we had 10 SEC games, people love that.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think there will be a lot of push to go to a 9-game conference schedule.
What on the broader look across the nation? What are the top 4 or 5 teams you see? Let's hold the SEC out of it for now and look at the other conferences. Who do you see as the power teams? Anybody joining that top group of 4, 5, 6 schools, or anybody dropping out of that group?
Well, there's certain schools that we just don't know, but I think the team to watch this year is Ohio State. Ohio State, Ryan Day has done an incredible job there, but he hasn't beaten the right people. He should have, in their minds, they should have gone to the national championship game when Georgia went in 2022. They lost a heartbreaker there, lost again to Michigan. And so I think and they've gone out, they basically told Ryan Day, whatever you need from an NIL standpoint, you can do. Just do it. And they are investing a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources. This is going to be the year for Ohio State. Now, I've got them playing Georgia in the national championship game in Atlanta.
That would be exciting. We will see how that works. I can't disagree with any of those opinions. Before we let you go, Tony, I want to ask you about your newest book, The 19 of Green. I know it's about you were on that team, right? 1970.
Right.
And you were watching integration of the small towns, small communities, all at the same time you were trying to play football. What can you tell us about this book? What inspired you to write it?
Well, what inspired me to write it is I was back in 2019. I was cleaning out some photos that my mom had, and she gave them to me. And one of the photos was our team photo from the 1970 season when we fully integrated the schools for the first time. And it's about football, but it's really not about football. It's about the fact that what we all went through together. Once spring practice was over, we only had 19 players, 12 white, 7 black. And that was a group of guys that we went into the season with. We ended up having a good season. We rallied the town behind it because a lot of people were not convinced that the integration was going to work. And it's a Remember the Titans book. There were a lot of schools that went through what we went through. But what I found so gratifying was I was able to track down, there were 15 living players now. I was able to track down all 15, all the living coaches, teachers, administrators, just to write about what that was like, what that transition was like. And I learned so much from going back and living that part of my life again and meeting with these guys and learning a lot about the fact that, like, for example, I tell people one of the things I learned in the book is that we as the white students did not fully appreciate what the black students had to sacrifice to make this happen. They had to give up their senior year at Floyd T. Carey High School, the black school, so that we could integrate the school. Greene County High School stayed the same. I didn't have to change. I got to graduate from the school I thought I was going to graduate from, but the African-American students did not. And I don't think we ever fully appreciated what they had to go through.
Tony, I know I held back one of your accolades when you went into the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, which is awesome. And you went in with Tom Glavine, Brian Jordan. I mean, you went in with some other greats from the state of Georgia. And obviously the award was richly deserved by you, greatly earned by your great work. But I want to ask you about, shortly after you go in the Georgia Sports Hall of Fame, you're kicking back in your home office with your feet up, presumably eyeballing that plaque again to make sure nobody had taken it away or didn't need another shine or something like that. When something crazy happened, and I want to flip the switch on Tony Barnhart and ask him, what happened that day that you'll never forget?
Oh my goodness! We had a tree fall on our house. It absolutely split our house in half, and we were out of our house for 9 months. We lost 4 bedrooms and a master bath, and so I am working on the book while all this is going on. We moved to an Airbnb house. We were there for 9 months, and I'm working on all that, and it was a calamity, but we finally got back in and had a chance to finish up the book. So yeah, that was a crazy time in our lives. And
you lived to tell the tale right here on Fans First.
Well, Jim, I am really thrilled that you would include me in your podcast, and I appreciate your kind words.
Well, we love having you on. I hope we can lure you back someday to talk some more about your books and about college football.
All right, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, great visit. That's Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, married to Mrs. College Football. Honored to have him as a guest on our very first program.
Hey, get off my lawn.
Well, as we mentioned to you before, we are very much involved and want to be even more heavily involved in interactivity between those of us here working on the podcast and those of you out there who love their sports and want their opinions heard, and we want to hear your opinions. And the first opinion that we're going to have on Fans First, a sports podcast, comes to us from Greenville, South Carolina, where Andrew Gibbons sent in this.
Jim, can we please stop with the media narrative and obsession with Jim Harbaugh? The guy did 3-game suspension for recruiting in 2023, 3 games for alleged sign stealing at the end of the season by the Big Ten. And I don't know about you, but I think most college football fans are kind of done with it. The guy paid his price. He's gone to the NFL. He's not coming back. Leave the guy alone. It's not that big of a deal anymore.
Okay, Andrew. Yeah, get off my lawn indeed. I have to tell you, if you're trying to make anybody feel sorry for Jim Harbaugh, I think that's going to be a tough, steep hill that you're going to die on. Unfortunately, there is no rule book that says how long you have to go before you've done enough penance to be able to not be criticized anymore for systematically cheating in college football, cheating where you won and actually got a national championship because the administrators of sports in college failed to keep that from happening, which they certainly should have. Jim Harbaugh did not deserve to be coaching in the national championship game and taking his team for extra games. I know he was punished some, as you point out, but nonetheless, I mean, if you think that there's just a time clock that you can run out and then everything is good after that, why don't you check with Barry Bonds? Maybe you give a phone call to Mark McGuire, maybe drop a line to Sammy Sosa or Albert Bell or Alex Rodriguez. Maybe you talk to, how about Fred Lork back in the Olympics in St. Louis in 1904. He ran a marathon in the Olympics, 3 hours and 13 minutes, won easily. And he did so by hitching a ride with a passing car for 11 miles of the marathon. Do you think that anybody just let him off the hook back in 1904 and forgot about it? Actually, they kind of did. They gave him a lifetime ban, and he was reinstated a year later. So they didn't follow through either. But nonetheless, no tears coming from this reporter when it relates to Jim Harbaugh. But thanks for your submission.
Get off my lawn!
Well, I hope you had as much fun as I did with the first episode of Fans First, a sports podcast. We have so much more planned. We have so many more guests that are lined up. It's going to be a different flavor every week, different sport, different conversation, and we hope you'll be here for all of that. Thank you again for being here for the very first podcast episode of Fans First, a sports podcast. Thank you for coming.
Stay tuned, stay passionate, and keep celebrating the sport you love. Visit us at fansfirstpodcast.com to explore more. Sign up for our newsletter to receive exclusive updates and follow the podcast on social media to join our growing community of sports enthusiasts. Your voice matters to us, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts and connect with fellow fans. See you next time.